evening and welcome to tonight's show from DJNTV, Disc Jockey News TV. Tonight's show is brought to you by Electra Voice, DJ Event Planner, DJ Trivia, Odyssey Innovative Designs and Cases, NLFX Professional, Promo Only, and the DJNTV Insiders.
DJ Event Planner will change the way you manage and run your business. Streamline all of your procedures and software into one easy-to-manage system. DJ Event Planner, the ultimate online planning tool.
Okay, I think we're here finally. Yes, we have audio. We're streaming. We're on YouTube. Nice.
Are we?
We
okay,
are.
We are.
Whew.
Somebody said okay.
Oh, we are on YouTube, which means we're in all these other spots too, and that means I've got to go to all these other. I got to go and delete videos all over tonight because I think this is going to be our 14th start of our show tonight. I'm hearing something.
Oh, okay.
Something.
Yeah, that was me watching the previous replay.
Oh, that was our first show, our whole 2-minute show.
Yeah, that was the shortest show we've ever had.
Yeah, it was probably our best viewed show too. Oh, this is going to be great. So for those of you watching, we are going to be talking about generators and things, but you're going to have to give us just a second because we've got to
fire up the generator.
And we're going to be doing all of that things. Actually, I'm sending the link around here for the new link, and it should be popping up for folks. So no, Chris, it wasn't you. The night that we're going to be talking about needing backup and generators, that's when everything just went go. Except my lights in the back. Those
we've had an uncanny run of that. Like, remember the night we were going to talk about cables and your cable failed?
That was very interesting. We were talking about quality XLRs and then.
Yeah, we've had several. I mean, I don't know, like I don't think it's my mojo, but it seems to just follow me around. This happened to Robbie Britton at Arm DJs too. We were going to talk about cables and his cable failed. So I don't know. I feel like I'm part of something bigger.
Next week, we're going to be doing a show on winning the lottery.
Yes. Here. I'm on the road the next 21 days, but I will find a connection.
We'll find a connection, and we'll have to make sure we neither of us bought tickets, but all of our viewers bought a ticket, and you wouldn't believe how many of them won. Okay.
Yeah, we're all going to split the jackpot.
Yeah, exactly. We'll all end up at 37.
Everybody gets $6. Mm-hmm.
So, Ben, generators, let's dive into it because folks have been waiting for almost 20 minutes.
I just did that show a minute ago. You missed it.
Okay, so start us off.
Well, so, and again, there's this irony that, we have a power outage or whatever it was that hit us right when we're going to talk about generators. And that, of course, is one of the places generators are useful is in the case of outages. But typically, we know we're not going to have power to begin with, and that's why we bring a generator. Usually not a backup necessarily so much as the primary power source in a place where we otherwise wouldn't have power. Or enough power in some cases. And I've got a picture of me with a generator from one of my shows. Will pop up a little later. But principally, there's two kinds of generators, and I guess we'll call them normal generators and inverter generators. And I'll kind of get into the difference here in a little bit. A couple of the really key considerations when selecting a generator for your event would be, number one, power draw. How much power do you need to produce, in order to power your rig? And then, of course, how accurately does the generator reproduce a sine wave? Obviously, clean power is essential to producing clean audio. It's the lifeblood of our entire rig. And then a few others that would be really important to me is, and in no particular order because they're all important, fuel consumption. How long can this generator run? Can you refuel it while it's running, which leads us to fuel types. I'll kind of come back to that. And then noise. How loud is the generator? If the generator is really loud and obnoxious and you're trying to do sound reinforcement, that might be a real problem. You're creating ambient noise in an environment where you're trying to create sound. So we'll kind of hit some of the highlights of that. I'll just throw in the fuel thing right quick. Most DJs are using gas generators. That's very typical, very common, some like the Honda EU and that sort of thing. Other types of generators would include diesel, which is a much less flammable fluid, but probably a bit larger unit, maybe. Most of the generators that we use, well, pretty much all the generators that we use are diesel. And then also there's even like hydrogen and some other things. And if we think about it, and I'm just going to get off the real topic here for a second because it wouldn't be a show with me if I didn't, right? So I just want to get this out of the way right away. Pretty much all of our power comes from a generator when we think about it.
Yeah, that's true.
Whether it's hydroelectric or wind power or even, a fuel-fired plant that generally uses steam on a turbine or something. And it's all fundamentally the same at the beginning anyway. So tell me where you want to go from here. And we've got some really important nuggets we can cover when it comes to generators and reliable power.
Well, you kind of started in mentioning the idea of the understanding the load or how much you're going to need for power and wattage, which we just did a show a few weeks back talking about getting sound from 100 watts. And I've since that show, I've been playing with some different little inverter type devices. And I've been finding out that when you were showing the music and how the dynamic range of the music would cause a different load, I've been seeing a lot of that. Specifically, if I'm doing a type of music, we don't overload this little inverter. If I'm doing things that have a larger dynamic range, we're overloading that little inverter. And yet it wouldn't seem that we should, but we are, because all of a sudden we have our spikes, which is something that we have to take into account for when we're talking audio for Shirley.
Absolutely. And most generators, if you look at their ratings, they will have a continuous power rating, which is not that dissimilar from what we just talked about with our audio power show. And then most of them, will handle some surge, some transient amount of power. So that's an important thing to look at. All generators are definitely not created equal. So dig into those specs a little bit.
Yeah.
Talking about power draw, this is a really good place to jump in, I think, because it's very difficult, it seems, for people to find out how much power their gear draws. And the only reason I say that is because of the overwhelming number of messages I get with people asking me, saying, I've got this, and this. Can I use it on this generator? Generally, I try not to get too deep into it because there's a level of complicit there. If things go wrong, you're sort of you're involved with it.
Yep.
But two, what I really want to do is help people to understand how that can vary and how they can solve this problem for themselves on a continuous basis. So in the simplest of terms, when we're talking about generators, most of them are measured in watts, which is a little bit confusing to people because our circuit breakers in the panel are usually measured in amperes.
Yep.
So if you have, amps for breakers and watts on the generator, that can be a little bit difficult for people to do some of the math. Now, I'm going to make it even worse by saying that there's two different ways we can measure this. There's real power and there's apparent power. So depending on the power factor, and that is the ratio, whether we have resistive loads or reactive loads, is going to give us a different wattage rating as opposed to a volt ampere rating. So now that I've just told you how difficult and frustrating this can be, I'm going to tell you that there's a much simpler way. And you and I really need to start getting a commission from Kilowatt because we just talked about them last week. And, it's another time we can mention this. This little device here is probably the easiest way for you to figure it out. Now, be mindful that you don't overload it. So, I don't necessarily recommend, it says, max power 1800 watts. Let's take this in chunks, but we can take this and measure the power draw of some of our gear and take some notes. And bear in mind that plugging in a powered loudspeaker and playing music softly through it is not going to give you a very meaningful number. We really have to do this, the way we're going to do it at an event. And then we can start writing down some values and say, okay, this speaker drew about this much power used at that level. And, look for sustained numbers and look for peak numbers and that sort of thing. And likewise, you'll find other devices use, varying amounts of power and start to tally that up. And then, of course, just like we always talk about with audio, having enough rig for the gig, have enough generator. There were a few generator spec sheets that I read that talked about, 100%. And I thought, gosh, why would you ever run anything at 100%, And then there were others that said 25%. So I think if you have a generator and you're running it at 60, 70% of the load, you're probably just fine. You've got some overhead there. You're not working that thing too hard. But in the simplest of terms, the other way you could do this, and I would say a distant second best, is you can look at the fuse ratings for your devices. Now, mind you, that is the maximum amount of amperage that fuse is going to allow before it trips. It's probably not what you're realistically drawing. So if you do this by fuse ratings, you're going to have way more generator than you need. But we can take those fuse ratings times the voltage. In the US, it's 120, and that will give us our wattage. So power equals volt times amperes in a purely resistive sense. The kilowatt's the best way, though. It's real world.
Now, one of the things playing with the kilowatt with the speakers and audio testing here this past week is that I don't think the kilowatt is as quick with detecting those little spikes that we were talking about in the last show when the music had that. Are there devices out there that are quick enough to pick up those little quick spikes that music would pull through a sound system?
Well, sure. They are, but we're mostly interested in the the RMS power anyway. But those who are more comfortable with electricity, there are clamp meters that we can use. There is actually some kits you can go to Home Depot and buy, and again, sort of at your comfort level. But it has a device that you can plug in to the source, the power, and then you can plug into the load and then clamp around. I've kind of made my own, but I would say that is really only for experienced people.
Right.
So you can get this device, and depending on the quality of the meter, it'll be a little faster at picking up those transients. But again, remember the amplifier itself is not responding instantaneously because the capacitors and things in there are sort of absorbing some of this.
Yeah.
So I would say just kind of let's look at approximate amount of power. That we're using, pad it a little bit for safety, and you're going to be in good shape.
Yeah, and I think that's one of the points I was finding out as I'm doing my stuff is that, okay, so is a 50% pad, is it 100%? And depending upon the devices, some things needed that additional to make sure that it had that additional room. So we kind of figured out, get an idea of kind of adding up the wattage and different things. What we have, we make sure we have that little padding and such. Which devices, I mean, you mentioned inverters, you mentioned generators, and there's a difference between the two. Which one is the right one for our application?
I would say for most DJs and portable audio applications, probably an inverter generator is best for a couple key reasons. Number one, and by the way, I'm just going to take a little tangent because I'm a nerd, and I'm going to do a nerd thing here, and we're going to talk about how power is generated. Basically, when we start, moving, we've got generally magnets and coils. When we start moving a wire into a magnetic field and we start generating power, most generators are AC by nature. And that's due to the direction of travel of the wire in the magnetic field. But we can use things like commutators to make DC generators and that sort of thing. But I just had to throw that in. I think it's fun to sort of know what's going on here. Why does it work? Why does a rotary engine make power? Same way that rotary wind does, or a rotary turbine in water or in steam or whatever. So we're doing kind of the same thing. The difference, though, is if we look on our kilowatt, it also says Hz, which is for Heinrich Hertz, and that is the measure of cycles per second, just like audio. And again, in the US, our power is 60 hertz, 60 cycles per second. So in order to do that in purely a spinning magnet wire type generator, our RPMs have to be very consistent, because that also creates the cycle rate. And so that could be a bit tough to do, especially in lightweight, low cost generators. So an inverter generator does a couple things, and it can do some things really well. Before I say what it does really well, it's probably a good place to just say they probably weren't thinking about you, though, when they invented it. They were thinking about the millions of other ways people are going to use generators. So there are a couple features that we might want to be a little bit wary of. A lot of features are driven towards, RVs and that sort of thing. So inverter generators typically generate power in AC, then convert it to DC, and then convert it back to AC. And the way that it gets converted back to AC is just like kind of like an inverter in a car converts DC to AC. You have a device, a circuit that is synthetically creating a sine wave. And in so doing, it can clock itself and basically maintain a very consistent 60 hertz, regardless of the RPMs of the generator. So that allows you to run the motor, the actual combustion engine or whatever it is that's powering this thing, at different revolutions and still maintain a consistent 60 hertz output. It also allows it to do a really good job with voltage, to try to keep that voltage very consistent. And the last thing that inverter generators tend to excel at is, and again, the generator companies by and large understand that nobody wants loud things, but they make them very quiet. Some of these things are below the threshold for speech. So they can be, I wouldn't say whisper quiet, but certainly not as obnoxious as they could be.
Right.
So those are some of the really key things about inverter generators that make them probably the number one choice. They're inexpensive, they're readily available, they're lightweight, and they tend to produce a very consistent power. Now, all inverter generators are probably not created equal, just like all other things are probably not created equal. Sure. The super cheap one may have questionable electronics. I don't know. I haven't tested them, so I'm not knocking them. I'm just saying it would just sort of stand to reason. Why is this one less money? Probably some corner had to get cut, right? So probably, and maybe at a future show we can, get a bunch of generators and test them, but that wasn't in the cards. So, something else that I think is noteworthy is a lot of these inverter generators, because they can run at different RPMs and that sort of thing, they can cycle down and go into like eco mode and that sort of thing, which gives you greater fuel efficiency. I don't have any scientific data to back this. Okay, so this is just me, the show business professional, and just my gut. I don't like eco mode. Yes, I love the planet. Yes, I want to live here a long, long time. Yes, I want my grandkids to live here. But on show day, really nothing else matters. I'm not really thinking about the planet. I'm only thinking about the show. And shame on me. But I don't like the idea of that thing throttling down at any point, just because I kind of want it running at its best all the time. Mm-hmm. And again, some factory reps from Honda or some of the other generator companies might come on here and tell me those fears are completely unfounded and I'm off base, and that would certainly be within their right to do that. It's just my gut. It's no science. I hear eco mood and I think reduced performance, and I think this is what's powering my entire rig. So, but no scientific data. By the way, just for fun, let me pop up a generator from a show that, and I found this picture from a year or two ago, but it's very typical of generators that we use all the time. So here, hopefully you have this picture up.
Yep.
That's a generator behind me.
Yeah.
And that runs that runs the audio at a concert.
The 4 uplights that you like to use, right?
Yeah, LEDs.
Yeah, those 4 LED uplights, because they do draw.
Now, of course, in that panel directly behind me is tie-ins for feeder tails, which is what we use, the 4-aught feeders that go to our system. It's actually a 3-phase generator, but more importantly, up above, there's a very sophisticated menu, and I can get power readings in both 120 and 208. I can get amperage readings. I can get RPM readings. I can get hertz readings. All that information is readily available to me. And so, this generator gives me a great deal of confidence. Also, it's a diesel. We turn it on in the morning. We don't shut it off for days, maybe, whatever. but this is sort of gross overkill for most DJ applications, and it is noisy. I mean, it's incredibly quiet for what it is when you consider, that it has the engine of a bulldozer in there, or a small locomotive. It's incredibly quiet, but obviously this isn't something you would typically see for an outdoor ceremony. Plus, it's kind of a bear to get from point A to point B. You don't carry it like a suitcase generator.
Yeah, I think that's one that gets trucked around. Now, you were talking inverter.
It takes a special truck too. You can't just put it on any old pickup.
Yeah, I suppose. Yeah,
that thing's a monster.
That's a big boy.
Yes,
so you're talking about inverters that are going from AC to DC and then back to AC. Now, a generator like that, is that also doing the same concept where it is generating in AC then converting it?
Again, these have different. There's different types. Once we get to that level, it's a whole different show. So let's just, because we get into other things here that are almost more critical with load balancing, that sort of things, where I've seen those where with a 3-phase load, it wasn't balanced correctly and it throws the main breaker and that sort of thing. So I would say if you're ever fortunate enough to be using a rig that needs a generator of that size, it's not really on the job training. I would just get a pro. And I would actually lean on the people from the generator company.
Sure. And
basically, just tell them what you're doing. Again, they're used to construction and that sort of thing. So don't be afraid to really overstate what you're trying to do. And, but again, if you're working at that level, you probably now have gotten a little better at load balancing and that sort of thing.
So let's kind of parallel, or the differeces then between an inverter generator and a typical generator that we can go to, Northern Tool and buy or wherever. There's sometimes a big price difference between the two.
Yeah, and again, the biggest difference here is the consistency of RPMs. If your RPMs vary on a non-inverter generator, you're going to change the cycle rate of that power, and I also find them a lot more vulnerable to surges and that sort of thing. We're kind of at the mercy of that internal combustion engine, and it really leads me to kind of say that if you have a generator, you absolutely must have a good power conditioner. And we've done some shows on power conditioning, right, and we've showed where some are basically almost useless empty boxes, at least as far as conditioning goes, and some are very well featured, and there are different types of features. So I really, even with an inverter generator, even though it does similar things to what a power generation plant does, they've pretty well got it figured out when they're generating power for an entire, region. Yeah. So you're relying on a device that you fire up, once a week or maybe twice a summer. That's the size of a suitcase. I would say just have a good power conditioner to plug into that, and have good metering if you're using a non-inverter generator, I think. I'm not a fan. I'm even nervous at like the inverter generators, and it's not that there's good cause to be. Again, this goes back to the gut thing. I guess the bigger ones just give me more comfort, I don't know. But, I would be very nervous if somebody gave me kind of a low cost construction grade generator and I was going to try to run audio from that.
Is there times where you're going to be worried about grounding when it comes to generators?
All the time. Absolutely. And in fact, I'm notorious for pounding in ground stakes myself when I see these large generators. Here's what I'm going to say about that though. Always follow the manufacturer's directions. And I just don't even want to say any more about it, because I don't want to tell you anything that might be contrary to what you might read. Whatever you read or whatever they say, that's what you do. Okay. Yeah, electricity always wants to take the path of least resistance to ground, and the secret to a long and happy life is to never be the path of least resistance to ground. So, don't take it from your buddy Ben. Follow these manufacturers' directions in all things generators, not just grounding, but in all things generators. Follow the manufacturer's directions. Look for generators that have UL or other laboratory approvals. It's just be safe out there. Okay. So yeah, I more than once I've seen sketchy grounding situations, and I've demanded it fixed for all the right reasons. One, call me selfish, but I don't want to die. I guess it's not negotiable, but I'm in no hurry. Yeah. So Two, I don't want to be the guy in the newspaper that cooked an entire band on stage when they grabbed a microphone and the grounding was bad. And, unfortunately, there are actual stories where that's happened with like ungrounded baptismal fonts and that sort of thing. So I just don't want to be that guy.
Right.
Always follow the manufacturer's directions. And, listen, now I'm on a roll here. I'm on a tear, okay? Our moat cable tester. Which I love, by the way, and thank you for so many of you that love it too. But I spent an entire weekend, myself personally, writing the user's manual for that, and I realized it was the most futile thing I had ever done because I knew that nobody was going to read it. I understood that when I wrote the user's manual that nobody was going to read it. Here's what I'm going to tell you. Read the manual for your generator. Just do it. I'm sure it's not a real gripper. I'm sure it's not a real cover-to-cover page turner, but just do it, please.
It will save potential problems and maybe a life.
And boy, believe me, if you take a life, you've got problems.
Yeah,
just, right or wrong, it's going to get litigated, Gosh, that's all I'm saying.
Mm-hmm.
So if you go buy a generator, read the directions, read the user's manual, and then follow what the manufacturer tells you to do.
So you've talked about diesel generators, and of course, gas is very common. And now propane. You were mentioning other different. Is there a certain type? If you were going to in the market for buying a generator for doing some sort of application, what would be your direction that you'd want to go and look at? Would you or recommend looking at when it comes to different fuel sources and such?
If I was a mobile DJ, which I was for 15 years, by the way, so there's a few people out there that just have to take a little shot at it. They said, well, Ben doesn't know, he's not a DJ, he just does concerts. Okay, well, I'm sorry that I'm no longer a DJ and I'm not helpful to you, but I was for 15 years and I did probably close to 1,000 shows. So anyway, if I was back to being a DJ or doing portable audio where I wanted a small portable generator, I would probably get gas. I would probably get a gas powered generator. Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Yeah, that's what I thought you were. Yeah.
Just had to clarify. I'm sure my wife is watching this, laughing.
She's like,
anyway,
both ways. She's like, both ways. It doesn't matter.
Already has it. Yeah. Well, it's your cooking, honey. Anyway, I would probably get worms.
So anyway,
I would probably get a regular gasoline generator right now, just because you can get it anywhere. But I think there are some real awesome advancements. There are some dual fuel ones too, by the way. I'm sorry, I forgot to mention that. There are some dual fuel propane gas, and propane's a lot cleaner burning, I believe. So that might be a consideration. Again, the only reason I might think about getting gas is just because it's you can get it anywhere. But propane's super common too, and hydrogen would be a little more on the fringe for me. And I would not get a small diesel generator. I would, if I was going to get a big generator like you saw in the picture, absolutely, that would be diesel every day. But we just had like a regular run of the mill, nothing special maintenance done. Oil filter, air filter, and a few other things. DOT certification on one of our trucks. It was $800. Diesels are expensive to maintain. They run forever, but it's another vote for the gas generator, I think. Oil change on my pickup is, $50. Yeah. Oil change on a semi is $800. I don't know. Anyway,
a little bit different.
So, yeah, there was a few other things in there too with the DOT certification and diesel particulate regeneration or something, but I don't know, whatever. Truck drivers that are watching the show realize they're like, wow, Ben's pretty smart when it comes to audio, but he's a moron when it comes to diesel. Yeah, I am. Yeah. That's okay. I got a guy for that. One other thing that we should mention, now that we've covered fuel source, get a dual fuel and you're covered, go propane, gas, whatever, maybe go propane, go gas, whatever you're comfortable with, is wattage, which we started talking about. And if the generator is not enough wattage, this is a cool trick. If you have a compatible model, you can actually get two generators that are designed for this. It's another feature to look for, parallel linking, and you can link them together. And so now, instead of having a 20 amp receptacle on the generator, you can get in this linking kit. Some of them will have like a 30 amp receptacle. Some will have like a 30 and a 20. Others will have like a 30 or a 50. So, if you need serious power, you can combine two of these. But again, make sure they are designed to be linked or paralleled, and make sure they're designed to be paralleled with each other. So they should be of like voltage and similar capacity. And again, do what the manufacturer tells you to.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah, especially when you're dealing with the parallel kit, because now you've doubled your power and doubled your potential getting curly hair side of it.
Or straight hair.
Or straight hair.
If your hair is already curly, it'll straighten it right out.
So let's we mentioned power conditioning a little bit. Somebody had asked if there was a rack mounted, and I think I saw that in one of the chats here, a rack mounted power conditioner that they could actually mount in with their system. And I would just assume the way they said it, with ceremony.
Of course, absolutely. Several of the models in the two shows that we've done on power conditioning. One with you and I, and then one because you were off doing goodness knows what. It was me and True North. So, we rocked that thing. But anyway, there are all kinds of good quality rack mount power conditioners that you can use. And there are others that are non-rack mount if that form factor is better for you.
That sounds good. Did we have any other things we needed to hit on talking about generators and inverters?
I think we've covered the bases.
Yeah.
Let's just recap kind of the hot points here.
Mm-hmm.
One is capacity. Make sure that you've got enough generator for what you want to do, or two with a parallel kit that are designed to go together. Two would be, how good is the power coming out of that thing? Is it a quality sine wave? Three, maybe would be weight and portability. Four would be noise. And five would be fuel type and fuel consumption. And most generators will tell you what your fuel consumption rate is. And, you'll have, like that big one that we have there. First of all, it can be filled while it's running, which not all generators can. So check. I think that thing on a full tank, the tank is the size of that thing and that deep underneath it, and it'll run for days. A small portable generator, obviously you're carrying the fuel with you. So look at your consumption rate and make sure you don't run out of gas in the middle of the event.
Yeah. Or those of us who camp run out of gas in the middle of the night on a really hot, humid night. No.
That might be another plus for propane, and I'm just shooting from the hip on this deal. But you can link a couple propane tanks together. There are kits that would allow that to be done safely. Again, read the manufacturer's directions.
Mm-hmm.
Blah blah blah. Yeah.
But a 30-pound tank.
That.
Yeah,
what's that?
A 30-pound tank can go a long time on a propane generator.
Yes.
DJ Extreme is talking about size of cables coming off your Genie or generator. Okay.
Yeah, the generators are often called Jennies, as a fun parlance or whatever. But size of cables, that's no different than, regardless of where your power comes from, size of cable is, it is what it is based on amperage and length. And I think we talked about in a previous show, because I've had some requests for it, my extension cord chart. If you ask for it, I'm happy to send it to you. Again, it's not an exhaustive resource. Follow all the manufacturer's directions, blah, blah, blah. It's sort of like a broken record, But I'll be happy to send you that guide. So again, it comes down to the length of the cord and the amount of amps you're drawing off that.
So, and I think one of the takeaways from the show when we talked about extension cords or power cords like that is while you can go too small can be a problem. To a point, you can't go too big with a standard extension cord.
Really. The only drawbacks of too big is you have to carry it. But other than that, it's, functionally speaking, you don't lose power in a bigger cable. So, if I only needed a 14 gauge to safely run the power and I used a 10, I don't lose anything.
It's just heavier.
Just heavier.
And isn't that why we have wives, to carry those heavy things?
I think I pushed my luck enough today on that already.
Well, come on. I was sitting up. I was trying to get one more brown to be able to and send it to Mrs.
We do have pretty awesome wives. But like I said, I'm on the road for 21 days. I don't really want to poke the bear too much any more than, I mean,
Yeah, not so much. Okay, so that kind of wraps up the generator area, but there was a direction I wanted to go on this before we wrap up and get Brian here. You mentioned our water generators that are out there and wind generators. Most of these are based on that magnetic, the wire, the coil, and things rotating. Nuclear power, steam.
Electromagnetic induction basically is what it is.
So now what is different between those, the power generated there, which is because of the rotation giving us that 60 hertz, and up on my roof, I have solar panels.
Well, look at you, big time.
There's no rotation happening up there.
No, and so that's a photovoltaic panel, and so which basically is a fancy way of saying it converts light into electricity, and that is coming out as DC to begin with.
Okay.
So that has to be inverted to AC. It's not, because like you accurately pointed out, you don't have a wire moving through a magnetic field. We have this process where light is converted by these photovoltaic panels into electricity as a DC power source. And that can be the same with other types, like a chemical battery, for example, a potato, those types of things where that power is DC and would have to be inverted to AC. And in fact, there are DC generators, but again, they use things like commutators, and it's kind of a fun little, be easier to draw it and explain, like a split ring with brushes or something. But anyway, there's like segments all around this commutator. Wasn't your question? Sorry.
No. But that so because of it being,
you should live in my head. It's a trip. I'll tell you.
I'm scared. I'm concerned. I'm very afraid, man. So it's the idea then, because of it being at DC, the inverter then converts it. In our case, it's converting it to a 220 signal. Then it feeds it back into the line, and that's all happening. And then that inverter then gets it the hertz and everything set properly for the system.
Yep, absolutely. And, probably there's some heat generated by that inverter, that's probably a consideration you have, and also you'll probably note that the cables coming from the panels are probably larger than you might think was necessary. And again, that's a product of it being DC, which gets into, a whole different ball of wax with electrical engineering. But that's why we use AC for long distance transmission lines. Yeah.
No, that is interesting. Yeah, because that observation of, it's like, goodness gracious, those are larger than jumper cable. I mean, that's almost larger than the lines that are coming in and bringing 200 amp service to the office. And that line coming down.
And it's ironic, because if we go back to the day of electricity, you had kind of the two warring factions. That's probably not an overstatement, between Edison and Westinghouse. And Westinghouse, of course, teamed up with Tesla, and that's the system we have today, AC power. But what Edison was proposing was DC power. And then the drawback of that is that basically every house would have to have a power generation plant. And of course, that was not at all practical or feasible at that time. Mm-hmm. And the bitter irony, and I don't really even want to show Edison any love here, but I'll just have to say the bitter irony of that is that, of course, as we get into roof solar and that sort of thing, we are now starting to get to the point where people do have localized power generation. But it's not practical for going long distances, which is why AC reigns. So
there we go. We learned even a little bit more. That's
in another note. I posed this question at a class in Mobile Beat, and I said, now we've got Tesla cars, and if a Tesla car gets stolen, is it an Edison?
Because of Edison stealing a Tesla idea. Oh, man. Oh, was I supposed to play dumb on that one? Ben, I don't understand. Can you explain your joke to me?
I thought your lack of reaction was plenty dumb enough. I know all the true nerds out there laughed. I know they did. Oh, John, I love you. You play the right guy for the you make me tolerable to the viewers, and I thank you for that. I really do. I think they thank you too. You bring a lot of balance to the show. So now, viewers, I'll say this: you should see John and I when we're off camera. Then you'll really appreciate what he does on camera.
Yeah. Well, some have gotten to see us when we've done a couple of our live shows on location, which that gets to be kind of fun when we can do those and have some fun with it. So, well, we need to wrap up because we've got Brian Red, who's going to be ready here in the wings in just a moment. So, for all of those of you watching at the different spots, I think we peaked out at about 85 people watching at the different locations tonight. So we want to thank everyone for being with us in our early problems with the show. And
Yes. Thank you.
yeah, we will be bouncing back here a couple more times this summer as we have more topics. And if there's something you'd like us to cover in our Tuesday night show, even if it's a smaller topic, then we might add the 10 question night. We might be doing one of those. Or if you have something more in a larger fashion like the generator, send it to either Ben or myself, and we will put it on a show this summer. So, Ben, thanks for being on. Gang, thank you for being with us, and we will catch you next time. Good night, everybody.